Australia is a nation in crisis, and the time has come for Scott Morrison to show some leadership. Leadership a nation requires when in trouble. Leadership Keating, Hawke or Howard would have shown. Because so far, Mr Morrison has been missing in action, again. He has formed for failing to lead Australia when Australia needs him most. And Australians are crying out for leadership that will steer our ship, which has been rudderless for 18 months with an incompetent crew at the helm. Australia has no leadership on any side of politics. And what is evident is Australia is dysfunctional, and every national cabinet meeting makes it more obvious. Mr Morrison is overwhelmingly responsible for the disastrous state Australia finds itself in. Mr Morrison is also responsible for dividing Australia and turning Australian against Australian. He is a Prime Minister who appears incapable of leading with state leaders out of their depth, plunging Australia towards an unmitigated disaster. Victoria is now in its 6th lockdown. It has a Premier prepared to destroy lives to suit his political agenda. And Andrews has declared Victoria will experience further rolling lockdowns. How much more pain can Victorians endure? It's not too late for Morrison to be the leader Australia desperately needs. It's not good enough that he adopts an arm's-length approach to national crisis and lets state premiers formulate incomprehensible policy. Andrews is economically and mentally crippling Victoria. No longer should state borders close or children's lives be ruined where hope is stripped away as they wallow at home in despair. With Australians living in uncertainty, where mental health, domestic violence and drug addiction escalate disproportionately to the rates of death caused by COVID, mental health is also a pandemic being brought about by hubris, stupidity and incompetent bureaucrats. No longer can lives be ruined or have state premiers run policy that contradicts everything that is logical, or allow pathology groups to wield undue political influence on decision making to strip taxpayers of billions of dollars. And no longer should Mr Morrison sit on his hands and watch as Australia descends into complete disaster. The time has come for Mr Morrison to do what he was elected to do, be our Prime Minister, not an armchair advisor. Australians need leadership, and that means a uniform national policy that incorporates all differing factors, which is what should have been deployed March last year. Yet, Mr Morrison has left it to the states and a cabal of advisors and incompetent bureaucrats to manage. But, just as the Prime Minister must wear the blame for where Australia now finds itself, so too should blame be applied to Australia's political class and the media. COVID has exposed the lack of leadership that exists on all sides of politics, and that has been reflected by the inability of government or opposition at any level to propose a meaningful way forward. They've brought into the narrative around PCR testing and how it is the gold standard, as well as a commitment to population vaccination threshold as a way out for Australia. And they have worked hard to sell the narrative, and it appears they've done it successfully. But they've got it wrong. Their failure to understand why a raw number of COVID cases, an ineffective way of managing COVID, is the biggest hurdle to deal with a pandemic is astounding. Australians have a right to ask, why is government using a key measurement that is pointless? The Prime Minister's goal of achieving 80% of Australians vaccinated is unachievable anytime soon, because the closer we get, the harder it gets to achieve that threshold. And for what purpose? What is 80% vaccination threshold going to achieve on current levels of vaccination? The fundamental measurement that we're using to control COVID is wrong. It must change. Australians have a right to be angry and frustrated. They have a right to feel they have been misled by incompetent leadership. If the same failure of leadership continues, Australia will fast become the laughingstock of the world. Here in Australia, we once prided ourselves as a lucky country. However, our luck seems to be fast running out.